Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Open Source Education Podcast. I am your host, Precious, and I am very excited to speak to you today. So today's episode is inspired by a story, right? I've always actually been very interested in this particular topic, but then a story broke out a few days ago, and it just made me push this up on my list of topics I want to talk about on this podcast, right? So today we're going to be talking about security in open source, and I will start with the story, right? So this is the story of the XZ exploits. So a few days ago, malicious software was found in the Linux ecosystem. So apparently there's been this maintainer from Finland, Lasse, and he's been maintaining the project since 2009, unpaid. And then somebody joins their community, their fan, who builds trust in their community for like 3 years, like 2021 until this year, 2024, and they were found out to be a malicious person that nobody actually knows their true identity until now. So at some point, Lasse is going through some mental health issues, and so he's not contributing as much as he used to, or probably making fixes to the software. And there's some sort of bullying in the community, right? People are like, well, it's going to take years because the community is not fast in implementing new changes. And so like the pressure is just so much. And then Jethan comes in, like there's like the whole good cop, bad cop thing. And Jethan seems to be the one always defending him. And then there's Precious accepts Jethan as a co-maintainer for the project, because right now it's not public goes people to leave a lot of his time to it. Keep in mind that this is actually an unpaid project by his recollection, something for like 15 years. And so he gives Jethan mental privileges for the project, right? And I think for the whole year, everything is fine. Jethan makes some few changes to the project. But then, a few years ago, a Microsoft engineer, Andre, is doing some tests on this code, notices some abnormalities, and tries to check it out, only see that there's some sort of backdoor, and that the XZ utilities that is like found in a lot of tools in the Linux ecosystem, a lot of organizations has been tampered with. And then he like alerts the open source community and organizations. Thankfully, the release was like a very new one, and it was still in the unstable version. So Andre's information makes his organizations roll back the release they just installed. And so like it's a whole thing, it blows out in the whole community, and everybody's like, how much has this person been able to dream? How intentional was this? They've not been able to find the identity of who Jethan is. And there's like a lot of speculations, right? And it's such an interesting story because one, it brings up a lot of questions, right? Because you're like, how do you identify bad actors? This is open source, it's accessible. One of the core things of open source is saying, oh, hey, come collaborate with us, right? And so in your advocacy, in quotes, of the facets that open source is built on, how do you tell who is a bad actor or who probably has malicious intentions towards your project? How are long-term contributors protected? Because obviously Lasse has been contributing for a very long time, and the one time he has like some kind of mental health issue, there's no help, and everybody's just ganging up on him. And was there like a code of conduct in the community? Was there like a board of directors to say, oh, this kind of behavior is not accepted in our community? Whoever were the people that were speaking against and like bullying Lasse could probably have been reprimanded. How are they compensated? He's been contributing to this for like 15 years. 15 years is a very long time to not have any sort of compensation. And so there has to be like appreciations in place, actually. These are conversations that we should have, right? Our code of conduct established in communities. I think one of the reasons why Jethan was able to even get in was it seems like he was the only one defending Lasse against everybody else that was coming against him. And it's human nature, right? You feel more at peace, in quotes, with the person that is like standing up for you, right? So if there was like a whole board or the whole community behind him that people could go to, it's probably going to have been easier to have maintainers get into situations like this. And so like, how can incidents like this be avoided in the future? There's no telling what kind of incident might come up next time. So what are some of the things that we can put in place, right? I try to answer some of these questions, hopefully. And the ones I can't answer, then the whole conversation. Maybe you should just think about it, really. Here's some of what I know anyway, and I'll just talk about it. So typically, we know that security is a state of being secure, right? And it's such a tricky thing because aside from technology part, where we try to put in checks and balances and make sure that, your code or your software goes through certain things to be able to say that there's nothing malicious in this, we also know the human factor, right? Which is why, as much as organizations will tell you, make sure that you sign into the correct websites and make sure that you don't reply to certain phone calls asking you for sensitive information, don't give out sensitive information on the internet, that sort of thing. Sometimes the human factor can be very naive and gullible, and we used to see people who just discard their passwords or don't use really strong passwords. So how do you know when the next person doesn't have malicious intentions also, right? And that's why open source is such a beautiful thing, because on the one hand, as much as this is something that has come up and it's a old story and everybody is rattled, you kind of know that the reason why the problem was actually detected almost as quickly as it was because this is an open source tool, right? Andrew was able to go look at the source code and understand exactly why his code was acting the way it was acting, right? And it's such a cool thing that as much as the reason why they started in the first place is because it's an open source project, it's also really cool that the reason why it was found out in the second place is because it's an open source project. The fact that source code is out there makes it easier for people to review and assess and make changes as needed, right? Obviously, as we've seen, this access is still what could bring in harm, especially without tech. So for the most part, the recovery process is easier. And so while we think about these processes, some of the things that I would like to see when it comes to incorporating security in your open source community or organization or project would be that mentors would probably need to verify that the person they want to make co-maintainer is an actual human they can trace. Of course, this is very uncomfortable, but circumstances have warranted it. Someone like Jota, nobody's able to tell who they are. Are they an entity? Are they an organization? And there's those speculations about them being like a whole government being. I'm pretty sure some conspiracy theories that come out of it, but that's a side point. I think it's going to be a lot of good. And well, now that I actually mentioned that, it's also quite tricky because these days there's AI and there's deep fakes and somebody can form like your whole identity, like probably do video calls with people you think are human beings, but they're not. But to a certain extent, it's really good to be able to say, as much as this person has built a reputation, can I see proof of actual human existence? This is like doing a whole captcha test. We just want to verify that you're human, that's all, right? So I think that's probably going to be very helpful these days going forward, to have some kind of proof that the person you're actually letting into your system is letting as a co-maintainer. You can't obviously track everybody as a contributor, but when it comes to sensitive positions like co-maintainer, it's really good to be able to say, oh, I know that this person is so or so. And as much as it's probably uncomfortable, I'm pretty sure even without malicious intention, should be able to give some kind of information that you may use to verify that they're human beings without giving too much at the same time. And obviously, this goes without saying that whatever information that they give should be verified and protected, actually. This is security we're talking about. Also, maintenance would also need to make sure that everyone has access to merging code on their repo. I have seen some open source projects where you are allowed to merge your code after making changes to it, and I just think that's terrible. Not even from a malicious perspective, but more, what if I'm a newbie and I don't know what I'm doing? Who reviews my code, right? And what if I put changes and then it shows on the actual tool that is already being used by tons of people? It just ruins a lot of things before changes can be made. So yeah, that's something that should be watched. Which merging access on your repo. You can obviously make changes, make suggestions, do like a pull request. It has to be reviewed before it's added. There also has to be an existing code of conduct and a body that oversees and enforces this. This is very important because people need to know that when they contribute to a project or when they are a part of a project, they are protected, in quotes. I need to know that if I come into a project and somebody's being malicious or unkind towards me, there are rules that have already been set in place to be able to caution them, right? And so this also helps because when contributors are being harmed, they have a whole entity behind them and single actors do not have an opportunity to take advantage of that whole vulnerable situation. Also, maintenance should have some sort of compensation, especially long-term maintenance, really. Contributors maybe will not be easy to be able to gauge how much actually you can. GitHub will show you. So people that have been long-term contributors should have some sort of compensation, right? And that tool that was exploited, the XE, is a tool that is used by numerous organizations that obviously profit from it, right? And so there has to be a system set in place to have these organizations make donations and service as companies and have long-term maintenance of contributors reap from their labor, no matter how little, to be very honest, right? Even if it's like GitHub donations, even if it's like a set amount of tech monthly, right? It's something you profit from. It helps your business. If it wasn't, a lot of people would not have been affected by the unstable release that hadn't even really gone so far, right? And so I don't think it's out of place to ask that you make donations to whatever open source community or project to responsible for the tool that you are using in your business. And especially at like 15 years is a long time in the case of last year, right? Meta was contributing to the project for over 15 years and there was no compensation for it. That's enough years to raise a child from a baby to a mini adult. That's really, really long. Also, one of the theme, and as I mentioned, there has to be, as there is a code of conduct that is established, there has to be some sort of mental health checks put in place. For instance, the chaos community that I contribute to, there are like 2 weeks, twice in a year, where there's not enough meetings and contributions are like slowed down and so people can rest, right? So maintaining mental health should actually be considered all the time. So much pressure on one contributor takes a toll after a very long time. And obviously people who contribute to products like human beings, they have lives, right? What if they were just going through a layoff? What if they just had like a family crisis or if they had an emergency? If they say, I'm currently going through this, they should feel safe enough to actually be able to express their concerns and at the same time have their concerns valued. So yeah, mental health is something that I should always consider. This goes without saying, but I really do not like bullying. And bullying somebody for something that they're doing voluntarily is just not it. And so for communities that probably don't yet have code of conduct, work should be done now to make sure that one is established so people don't have to fall prey to the situations where one person is standing up for you makes you feel that, oh, this person is on my side and maybe repeats a case of the whole Jiatan situation. It's better for the code of conduct to be established by the board of directors or the whereby adding the means of that project. It just makes it easier to not get into settled head. Yeah, and that's like some few tips I have for institutions or open source projects. And as mentioned earlier, there's only so much that we can do on the human factor part of security. But we should definitely keep trying our best to do what is most beneficial to all of us, really. And I think every single person who has been contributing to open source for a very long time is a hero, because I know how taxing can be, especially if we are not paid. And it's very, very interesting because there are some parts of open source that you can get paid, right? There are some companies, there's some projects. I think it is something that if we put more efforts into it, most people will be able to create a system where long-term contributors and maintainers are compensated. Even if you're just starting, there should be some sort of guarantee that after a while you should be able to get some kind of compensation when you contribute consistently in this project, especially if it's a project that is used by a lot of organizations or companies that make profits. Good luck to all the heroes, and I really hope Lassie got some form of compensation or can support the call, and that he doesn't feel so bad, because I can only imagine how he feels right now. You probably feel responsible for some of the issues that came out of it. And also really shout out to Andre for figuring it out. And I really hope your town gets found out at some point. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for your time. I hope I have been able to keep you currently for a significant amount of minutes. Until next time, see you soon.